Good evening. Come, sit with me a while. Tonight, I want to share a story from the Gospels, the night Jesus walked on water. You know the story, perhaps. Peter stepping out of the boat, the wind and waves, the fear of the disciples in the storm. But tonight, I want to imagine it differently, through the eyes of someone who might have been there, someone the scriptures don't name, but who would have seen everything unfold. An old man told me once, late in his life, about a night when he was a boy. A night he snuck down to the shore to watch for a boat. A night when he saw something that changed what he thought was possible. So let me tell you his story. The story of a boy who disobeyed his father and witnessed wonder. The rocks along the shore were still warm from the day's sun, but the wind coming off the water was cold. I crouched behind the old beaching stone where my father tied his boat, my arms wrapped around my knees, watching the dark water and trying not to shiver. I should not have been there. My father would be furious if he woke and found my sleeping mat empty. But I had heard the men talking in the market that afternoon. The teacher and his followers were crossing tonight, rowing to Bethsaida, and I wanted to see. My father forbade talk of him. This Jesus, this man who made fishermen leave their nets and tax collectors leave their tables and respectable people whisper in synagogues. Foolishness, my father said. A man makes his living. A man provides. These followers of his, he would spit into the dust. They'll starve and come crawling back. But I had seen them in the market sometimes, these men who had left everything. They did not look like they were starving. They looked like they had found something my father did not understand. I had asked once, carefully, what the teacher said that made men follow him. My father's hand had caught the side of my head, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to warn. You'll fish, he said, like your grandfather, like me, like your sons will. That's the end of it. But I was there anyway, waiting. The wind pushed harder against my back, and I pressed closer to the stone. This was my lake. I had played along these shores since I could walk, had learned to swim in these shallows, had helped my father pull in nets since my arms were strong enough to hold them. I knew every mooring, every good fishing spot, every place where the bottom dropped away suddenly into cold darkness. The lake at night was different, though, bigger. The friendly water of daylight became something else when the sun went down, something ancient and deep and careless of the small creatures who tried to cross it. A lamp flickered far out on the water. I squinted, my heart beating faster. That would be them. The boat cutting across toward the far shore, a tiny point of light surrounded by darkness. I could just make out the shape of it, low and heavy in the water, the kind my father used for the deep fishing. They were making good time. The wind was against them, but not badly. They would reach Bethsaida before dawn, and I would slip back to my mat before my father stirred, and no one would ever know I had been here. The wind shifted. It came from the east now, harder than before, carrying spray that stung my face. I wiped my eyes and looked back at the boat. The lamp was moving differently, rocking, and even from the shore, I could see how the boat pitched against the waves. The wind pushed harder still, and the temperature dropped so fast I gasped. My teeth started to chatter. This was bad. This was the kind of wind my father talked about when he told stories of boats that did not come back. I stood up, no longer worried about being seen, staring at that small, distant light. The waves were higher now, breaking white in the darkness, and the boat was struggling. I could see the lamp swinging wildly, could imagine the men inside rowing hard, trying to keep the bow pointed into the wind. my hands clenched into fists. I should run for help, should wake the men who kept boats here, should do something. But I could not move, could not look away. The wind screamed across the water, and I dropped back behind the stone, my whole body shaking now. Not from cold, from fear. Those men were going to die out there. The boat was going to capsize, and they would drown in the dark water, and it would be my fault because I had wanted to see, because I had been stupid enough to think watching was harmless. My father always said the lake punished fools. I pressed my forehead against the rock, trying to think. The village was too far. By the time I woke anyone, it would be over. And what would I tell them? That I had snuck out? That I had been watching the teacher's boat? My father would know. He would know I had disobeyed, and those men would still be drowning. And I looked up again, unable to help myself. The boat was still there, still fighting, the lamp still burning. They were strong rowers. Maybe they could make it. Maybe the wind would ease. I had seen storms blow themselves out as quickly as they rose. Maybe there was something else on the water. I blinked hard, wiping spray from my eyes. Another boat? No, too small. Not a boat. A piece of wreckage? But moving wrong, moving steadily, moving toward the struggling vessel like it had purpose. I stood again, straining to see through the darkness and the wind. It was a person, walking, on the water. My breath stopped in my chest. That was impossible. I knew it was impossible. I had watched my father fish this lake my whole life. I knew what water did and did not do. It held boats. It drowned people. It did not hold people up. It did not let them walk across it like it was solid ground. But I was watching someone do exactly that. The figure moved steadily through the storm, through waves that should have swallowed it, through wind that should have knocked it down. The water around it caught what little moonlight broke through the clouds, and I could see the surface responding strangely, not breaking, not splashing, just holding, supporting. The figure was robed, I thought, tall, moving with purpose toward the boat with its panicking men and wild lamp. My knees gave out. I sat hard on the wet sand, my eyes locked on that impossible figure, my mind trying and failing to make sense of what I was seeing. People do not walk on water. The rules were simple. Solid things floated if they were light enough or shaped right. Heavy things sank. People always sank. Always. Unless a boat held them up. Unless wood and air and the skill of builders kept the water at bay. But this person was walking. The figure was closer to the boat now, close enough that the men inside must be seeing it too. I could see the lamp swinging wildly, could imagine the shouting, the terror of men who knew what water did and were watching someone break every rule they had ever learned. The figure raised one hand. I saw it clearly, the gesture unmistakable even at this distance. And then something happened I will never forget. One of the men climbed out of the boat, stepped out onto the water, started to walk. I made a sound I had never made before, something between a sob and a laugh. My hands pressed over my mouth. He was walking too. Another man was walking on water, moving toward the first figure like the lake had turned solid beneath them both, like the rules had simply stopped applying. I watched him take 3 steps, 4, 5, watched his body pitch against the wind, watched him. He fell, dropped into the water, like weight remembering itself, like the lake had been patient, but would only bend so far. I cried out, starting to stand, but the first figure moved fast, reaching, pulling, and suddenly both of them were standing again, standing on water. the second man clinging to the first, both walking back toward the boat. The wind stopped, not eased, not faded, stopped, like someone had closed a door. The water went flat. The waves died. The air went still and cold and shocked. And in the sudden quiet, I could hear my own breathing, ragged and too fast. The two figures reached the boat, climbed in, the lamp steadied, and the boat began to move again, gliding now across water that had gone calm, heading toward the far shore as if nothing had happened at all. I sat there on the wet sand, my whole body trembling. The shore was quiet, except for the small sounds of water lapping at rocks. Gentle now, ordinary. My feet were numb from the cold. My tunic was soaked through, but I could not move, could not stop staring at the place where I had seen a man walk on water, where I had seen another man try. Eventually, I do not know how long, the boat disappeared into the darkness near the far shore. The lamp became a tiny point, and then nothing. The sky began to lighten in the east, just barely, the first hint that dawn was coming. My father would wake soon. I had to go home. But I sat there a while longer, my arms wrapped around my knees again, looking at the water. It looked normal, like the lake I had known my whole life, like the friendly daytime water where I swam and played and helped haul nets. But I had watched it hold a man up. I had watched it bear weight it should not be able to bear. I had watched the rules stop working. Later, walking home on cold feet, sand in my shoes, and my hair stiff with salt, I kept looking back at the water, kept expecting it to do something else impossible. But it just lay there, gray in the pre-dawn light, lapping quietly at the shore. I climbed back through the window of my father's house, my hands shaking as I eased it closed. My sleeping mat was still rumpled where I had left it. I lay down, pulled the blanket over my wet clothes, and listened to my father breathing in the next room. He did not stir. He would never know I had been gone. I closed my eyes, but sleep would not come. I could still see it. The figure walking, the water holding, the second man stepping out and walking too, for a few impossible heartbeats, before the lake remembered what it was supposed to do. I thought about my father's words, about making your living, about providing, about the only path being the path your father walked. I had seen a man walk on water. I had seen another man try and almost make it. And lying there in the darkness of my father's house, I understood that I had seen something my father could never explain to me, something that had nothing to do with being practical or sensible or following the path laid out before you. I did not understand what it meant. I was 10 years old and cold and probably going to be sick from sitting in wet clothes all night. But I knew I had seen something true, something that changed the shape of what was possible. And I knew, with a certainty that sat in my chest like a stone, that I would carry this night with me for the rest of my life. The water had held him up. That was all. That was everything. And I had watched it happen.